Thanks everybody for joining the channel. What we've got going on here is we've got three underrated pre-code horror comics. I'm joined here today with Mickey from Swagglehaus Comics and Drew from CoMo Comics. We each picked a iconic or well-known cover artist from the Golden Age that is known for creating some of these just incredible pre-code horror comics. And we each picked one, and we're talking about them, three of them here on this channel. If you want to see the other underrated books as well as the iconic books that we've also made videos for, make sure to go check out Swagglehaus Comics and CoMo Comics to see those videos. So start with my artist. So the artist that I picked, if you haven't watched one of the other videos before, it was Elby Cole. And he was one of the artists that really first got me into Golden Age, especially pre-code horror. It's just something about his covers just really grabbed my attention. It's those, they often just have these really bright color palettes, and I know it's been talked about before. It's like he had like an 8-pack of Crayola, and that's what he had to use. And so that's what we get on a lot of these covers, is just really bright primary colors. And so for this underrated book, the reason I picked this one is that it's an homage to Suspense Comics #9. Now, me personally, I mean, and sometimes it goes this way. Like, I like Suspense Comics #9 a little bit more, but this one is definitely much more of a pre-code horror vibe. Because if you go check out that comic, it's really just the background. It's that kind of like spiral and the eye in the background. Mm-hmm. But with this one, you added in that this guy is, a murderer. He's killed these people, and you've got these bloody heads and everything on the cover. So that's what Elby Cole liked to do. He did it with Startling Terror Tales 11, and as well, where he just made this more violent for the era. Because once we started getting into that, into the early 50s, that's when pre-code horror really took off, and you started getting these publishers just competing with each other's for eyeballs. Like, who can make the most violent thing to get people to pull that comic off the stand. And this was what he delivered for Shocking Mystery Cases number 51. Now, in terms of pricing, this one, it still is, I mean, it's not cheap. I mean, you've got a 6.0 that's going for $1,680, but for 1952, a really nice mid-grade copy going for under $2,000 really isn't all that, unaffordable. And then with the high sale going an 8.0 going for $4,080, I mean, that's one of the highest, one of the higher graded copies that's out there. The highest grade that's ever publicly sold was just an 8.5. Now, there are a few copies that are up in the 9s, but they have never sold publicly, so it's hard to know exactly what those would go for. But, I mean, when you're talking about a major artist like Elby Cole, you're talking about a cover that really grabs your attention like this. I mean, getting a book for a few $100s per point is pretty reasonable. Now, census, there are 53 universal copies out there, and so that's just the graded copies. I do think that there are probably more of them, and there's always more. It's never 100% of things that are graded, but I think you have a decent shot of coming across one of these books raw if you are spending a lot of time, checking eBay and going into, going to large shows and that kind of thing. I feel like at a large show, you might see this one raw on a wall and be able to pick one up for a reasonable price. But Drew, what do you think of this homage to Suspense Comics #9?
I see why he swiped it, because just the whole spiral thing, it really, it tells a story. It's like, this guy's gone down a downward spiral. You get the twisting motion there. You see all the bad things that have happened. He's clearly not excited about it. I think it's effective. The big difference between Suspense and this one is just kind of the perspective. Suspense, the tunnel was more straight on, and the eye wasn't quite as prominent. It was more kind of cartoony. This being set off, you almost feel like this guy's past is pulling on him. You feel like he's being impacted by some of the bad things that he's done. And I pulled up, I was looking at some of the stories that are within this. We've got A Murderer's Reward, which is our cover story. The Corpse Without Teeth. That sounds like a good one. And then we have a couple true crime stories, The Bloody Hands of Vengeance and The Shocking Tunnel Murders. So this issue, if you do find it raw, it's probably going to have some entertaining stories in there, at least if you want to go by the titles. But I mean, Elby Cole just has this thing where he had us figured out. He could just take a little of this, a little of that, recycle something from before, and kind of slap it all together, repackage it in a way that just we don't care. We don't care that this is from that and this is from this, and it's just, you can't look at this and not want to pick it up. And Star did a thing with their titles where they always have this big block word, and then they've got the spooky font for another word, and I know that's fairly consistent across a lot of the pre-code things. You mix up some of the fonts and stuff, but just the size of it's pretty effective here, and just the contrast between your straight block lettering and your kind of eerie lettering, and the color palette that they choose for that. Just with the primary colors he uses, it makes things just really pop and stand out. So I at this point buy every Elby Cole, unless it's jungle stuff, buy it all. It's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is definitely a really, really cool pick. One thing that kind of stood out to me as you guys were talking and just thinking about it, it's like we've seen a lot of the covers that have like floating heads on it or PCH and stuff, but this one is kind of unique with the floating heads because it's got the blood, surrounding them. And I don't know if decapitation happens during the story, but you're almost kind of getting sort of that decapitation feel with those heads, which is different than what you get with the normal floating head because of the blood factor. And I know that decapitation is definitely something that people in the PCH world kind of like. So
these are tasteful decapitated heads.
So, yeah,
so you're saying Kirby for his floating head covers, he should have thrown some blood on there. Yeah.
You could think of it would triple in value if there was just some blood underneath those heads. So I mean, but in that sort of spirit of underrated and undervalued, it's like, what are those elements, right? That people like to collect and people like to buy, and you get some of that with this. So very, very cool book. And yeah, I mean, Elby Cole, man, just buy an Elby Cole. I guess you can't really go wrong,
It's going to the moon, right? So
absolutely.
All right, let's move on to the second book here.
Yeah, this one is my pick here. Of course, my artist was Bernard Bailey. And this one's kind of in that tweener section, with the underrated, undervalued one, because it's hard to say that this one is either of those, but I wanted to include it and I wanted to talk about it. And it's my pick, so you guys have to listen to me talk about it. So this one right here is Weird Tales of the Future, number 8 from July of 1953. And I kind of call this the classic heart cover right here. Again, with the underrated, undervalued one, it's like Bernard Bailey has so many incredible PCH covers. And in a lot of ways, I think, like when I close my eyes and I think of PCH, in a lot of ways, I think of his types of books and his types of covers. And this is one of those ones. Like, I feel I want to call this one undervalued because I think, jumping down to the 2.5, for under $1,000, you can get this book. But I feel like this is a book that is sort of in that, mural of, oh, here's all the PCH books that have come out. And I feel like anytime you can get a book like that, say under $1,000, that seems like a pretty decent buy-in. And there's a lot of things I like about this one. I think it's different than a lot of PCH books where, you have the guy looking to get what I assume is his heart. You have a colorful color palette with this one, which, dare I say, makes it kind of a fun cover because of the saturated colors. You get a little skull in the background on the shelf, so you get your skull fix right there. And I don't know. Every time I look at this one, I think of like, I know this is a weird thing, but it reminds me of The Simpsons in a weird way, where I think of like Treehouse of Horror type of like elements here. And I think of that thing where when Bart Simpson was going to class and learning like Kung Fu or something, he was like, what'd you learn at class today? He's like, I learned to rip out somebody's heart and show it to them before they died. And that's what I think of when I see this book right here. So I don't know. It's a fun one. fun quotations, and kind of an interesting one. GPA sales, we got 64 on the census. Like I said, the 2.5 last sale for $9.90. And I think there were some other 2.5s that even went for less than that, but I include the last one, 4.0 for $1,800, and then an 8.0 as the personal best for $16,800. So not like super cheap, but I don't know, as being kind of one of the ones that I think of, maybe still sort of underrated a little bit. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, for me, I'm always surprised that this book isn't more expensive. I mean, kind of like you said, like being able to get like a 2.5, which a 2.5 can be a very presentable copy. You know, getting a 2.5 for under $1,000 for what is a pretty recognizable book. It always, like I said, it always feels like this should be a more expensive book. Now, the other thing, just this title in general, Weird Tales of the Future, is just packed with great covers. I mean, this is if you want to start looking, you know, if you wanted to go somewhere where you're like, I want to try to put a run together, you know, of pre-code, like horror and sci-fi. It's a little bit of both what you get with this one. This would be a great place to start. I mean, they are some are very expensive, but in general, like, I mean, with this, like, you could put that run together without spending, you know, bank breaking money. But yeah, I think it's a great choice, and yeah, I think it does have that kind of like a little bit of a humorous, you know, type feel to it. Like you could, you know, I mean, would you put this one on your shelf, you know, like in your living room, or not quite?
I put this one over the other Bernard Bailey ones that we've talked about.
That's
a little easier to explain to grandma on Thanksgiving.
Yeah. How about you, Drew?
My talking points kind of are similar to yours. Just looking at this title, you know, this is the last issue of this title. So it's only 8 books. And so many of the covers are just bonkers. And as you mentioned, there's that great alien peeking through the window cover. There's the like totem looking guy with his insides falling out in front of the girl with the red dress. There's so much weird stuff happening in just this small number of issues in this title that I think it's just really fun. But the thing, just looking at the cover, that really strikes me, it's like this is all happening in a spotlight. The lighting choices are so interesting because there's this major light source coming from our perspective. Like we're off here looking, or I guess let me do this right for camera. We're over here looking at this light shining at this guy, and you know, just the shadow work is so strong. And then a lot of the times things we talk about are the elements of what makes an effective pre-code horror cover. Like Mickey pointed out, you've got the skull. You've also got the weird looking, like old school beaker up there to give you kind of some creepy mad scientist vibes or whatever. You've got I want to call it an apothecary jar or whatever that is there in the foreground with mysterious, maybe the heart of the last guy who walked in. I don't know. But you know, there's just so much going on. And just the general design of the guy. I mean, it's bad enough to have your heart ripped out, but nothing about this guy looks natural. It's just all very distorted and contorted. And yeah, I like it. It's messed up, and I approve.
I also approve. All right, let's move on to the third book of this video.
All right, time to get some classic monster vibes up in here. Don Heck was my artist of choice. And if you guys have spent any time with me when I'm talking about pre-code horror, scary stuff, I am a sucker for the classic Universal monsters, and even beyond that, just the classic monster types, mummies, werewolves, vampires, all that kind of stuff, zombies. This is Don Heck just kind of staking his flag in the ground of badass werewolf covers from the 1950s. We talk a lot. I know, Ryan, you've talked about it on your channel before, the Tales from the Crypt 46. There's also the Tales from the Crypt 35, which are great werewolf covers. I personally really love Johnny Craig's Crypt of Terror 17, which is a very, very early pre-code horror werewolf cover. This is Don Heck up in your face being like, you like werewolves? Here you go. Here's one right up in your space. I love the inclusion of like the little wrought iron fence in the foreground to just kind of break it up. Vampire, or you can see the werewolf kind of hiding behind some trees. So it's just kind of like you've stepped out of your house, you're turning around, you're getting ready to open your gate, and bam, here's this guy right up in your face. And you can tell he's already been a little busy this evening because he's got blood coming out of his mouth. But you also get the spooky trees in the background. And I know this is something we've talked about before, that black background on the trade dress with that kind of ooze green, icky green for the actual title just really makes this pop, because the werewolf as itself, as you can see, has a lot of like gray tones in it. So it's just kind of you don't so much feel like you're looking at a comic book. It's almost like you're in there with this thing. It's got a lot of atmospheric vibes and stuff. So that's why I chose it. Value wise, again, this one's pretty affordable. If you go back to mid-June, somebody got a 3.5 for just $400. So at that point, you're just a little over $100 a point, which isn't bad. 5.5, you're right at that $100 a point for $5.60 in August, and then a 7.0, which is you're getting up there, especially with a cover with this much black in it. One sold for just $1,329 in mid-August. So this is a book that actually I was surprised at how many sales it had year to date, which that's one of the things that we deal with a lot in pre-code horror, Golden Age in general. There's just not a ton of comps. Generally, you've got big gaps in between these, but this one was fairly steady at the pace in which it had sold recently, which was nice to see. So maybe it's currently underrated or undervalued, but starting to pick up steam and maybe just be on more people's radar, because I think it's one of the better werewolf covers from pre-code horror.
Yeah, and for me, I think anytime you've got one of those primary, well-known monsters, then it is a recipe for people wanting to collect it. And the ones you see, I feel like you see vampires or play on a vampire a lot. We've talked about this, I think, in maybe last year's video, that you don't see mummies very often. And werewolves, I think, are like the next one that you see them some, but not as much as vampires. So if you want to, again, like if there's something you wanted to try to collect, like you wanted to try to collect the werewolf covers, this is definitely one of those that you would need to go out and try to find. And it is interesting to see that, or from what you said, that it seems to sell somewhat regularly. So that at least means that you should have a decent number of chances to pick one up. Now, the one thing I'll always caveat that with the Golden Age is sometimes it could be like maybe there was one sale that came up that triggered that. And so people like put their books up for sale. And so then you get people thinking like, oh, it's, maybe I have a chance, I can wait. And then you don't see one pop up again for another 6 months or a year. And so, yeah, I mean, if this is something that you're interested in, you really like werewolf covers, definitely one to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool one. And, referring back to what you said, Ryan, on the last slide, where we're talking about, would you put this one on the shelf? And maybe you wouldn't with that heart one, but like this one is one where it's like, what's cool about this is like, this is shelf worthy at all times, and it's cool because it's just classic, right? It's got the Universal monster feel. I mean, I realize, the super valuable PCH ones are some of the ones that are just so gruesome and they would upset, grandma and things like that. But this one is cool for the spirit of Halloween and the spirit of this video. And looking at that 7.0 sale, being that this is an all black cover, I would have to imagine that the 7.0 looks great, for a book like this. And for $1,300, that doesn't seem all that bad. Right. So very, very affordable and cool classic Universal monster book. So yeah, a great choice.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks everybody. This is the final book in our underrated pre-code horror comics for for this video. If you want to see 6 other underrated books, make sure to go check out Swagglehaus Comics and CoMo Comics, because we've got a bunch of other great books that we talk about there. And again, if we also had another video that we did on iconic covers for these 3 cover artists. So if you haven't seen those ones already, make sure to go look through our video history and pick out one of those videos to watch. But thanks, Drew and Mickey, for joining the channel. I really enjoy doing these and looking forward to doing this again next year.